Hello there, Atheist Junior here, your friend and humble narrator. And today we have a very special guest with me on the channel, Dr. Dan. He's a professor in the biology department at Rutgers University with a 97 approval rating on ratemyprofessor.com, by the way. And but his specific field is virology. And Dan is a YouTuber with a channel called Creation Myths, debunking creationist arguments like genetic entropy and irreducible complexity. So I'll have his channel linked below. But Dr. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the channel today. How are you doing?
Thanks. I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so I think it's appropriate to start with the topic of vaccines. So my local grocery store is actually allowing people to not wear masks because they've gotten both vaccines, which I did the other day, and it felt really weird. But I don't think we're out of the woods yet, exactly. So I've gotten both of my Moderna vaccines, but why do you think people should get vaccinated? Because there's still some skepticism about this, unfortunately.
Yeah, just some, right?
Yeah.
So two huge reasons everyone needs to get vaccinated if you medically can, and some people medically can't. So the first reason is to protect yourself, right? What we know about these vaccines is that they provide extremely robust protection against, and when I say these vaccines, I mean Pfizer, Moderna, and J&J, the ones that are approved for use in the US. Those numbers that have been published show very high success. And so one, they prevent you from getting sick in the first place. Two, they prevent you, if you do are infected, you can still get infected if you're vaccinated. It's rare, but it happens. If it does happen, it's much less likely to be a severe illness. And three, you are very, very, very unlikely to die if you are infected with SARS coronavirus 2 after being vaccinated. And we actually just a couple days ago got some new numbers out of Maryland. I think they came from the Maryland Department of Health. And the numbers were that in the past, I forget what the time frame was, past 2 weeks, past month, whatever it was, within the recent time frame, it was 100%, not 99 point something, 100% of COVID deaths in the state were among unvaccinated people. 95% of cases were in unvaccinated people, and 93% of hospitalizations were in unvaccinated people. So the vaccines provide extremely robust protection for an individual. Once you get it, you're very unlikely to get infected, and if you do get infected, you're very unlikely to get sick from it. The second reason everybody needs to get vaccinated is because there are some people in the population that can't. The largest group right now are children. The only vaccine that's approved for under 16-year-olds is Pfizer. That's only approved down to 12 years old. So anyone under 12 can't get vaccinated yet. So the way we protect those people is by having everyone else get vaccinated so that you induce herd immunity so the virus can't spread through the population. But there are also people that are above 12 years old that can't get vaccinated. Maybe they're immunocompromised, they're in radiation therapy or chemotherapy, or they have an autoimmune disorder, or something prevents them from being vaccinated. Maybe they're allergic to something in the vaccine, right? They can't get vaccinated. How do they get protected? By everyone else getting vaccinated, induce herd immunity, and it prevents the virus from spreading through the population. So we know the vaccines are really effective. We know they're really safe. The rates of side effects have been extremely low, lower than your average flu vaccine. And we do that every year. There's no reason not to if you are medically able to get vaccinated and are old enough. Everybody get vaccinated, please.
Yeah, the people who have immune system deficiencies, I think something that anti-vaxxers like Ken Hovind, I'm going to show you a little clip of him later because I want to have you respond to that. They forget about this because but we'll get into that later. But so you had a really great video called Intro to Vaccines that I learned a lot from. And
great.
One of the interesting things that you talked about in the video was sort of the misconception about how if you're 95% less likely to get infected if you have the vaccine, how that doesn't mean that 5% of people will get infected. Can you kind of talk about that again? Because that was, I really like that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's so it's an extremely easy to misunderstand when we talk about like how effective are vaccines. When we say a vaccine is 90% effective or 90%, 95% effective, what does that mean? And what that means is it's a risk reduction. So whatever the risk is for a given activity, if you're vaccinated and the vaccine is 95% effective at preventing infections, then the risk is reduced by 95%. So it's not that 5% of people who are vaccinated get infected, or it's not that 5% of people who are vaccinated get infected. It's not that there's a 5% chance of getting infected if you are vaccinated. It's the risk is reduced to 1/20th of the non-vaccinated risk, right? So if you have a situation, just hypothetically, if you have a situation where there's a say a 5% chance or 10% chance, right? If you're in a situation, let's say go into the supermarket, right? And it's during a big COVID peak, last winter when there were a lot of cases, and you go to the supermarket and you're not wearing a mask. Let's say that's a high risk. It's a 10% chance of being infected. Well, if you're vaccinated in that situation, it's no longer a 10% chance. So it's not 1 out of 10 you get vaccinated. It's 1 out of 10 times 1 out of 20. So it becomes a 1 out of 200%, or 1 out of 200 chance of getting infected in that situation. So it's a risk reduction by 95%, right? And I think using percentages is difficult because people tend to round percentages in their head to either it's about 50-50 or it's about like a sure thing without kind of paying attention to that gray zone in the middle there. So like if it's like below like 70-30, say, then people kind of round that mentally to like 50-50-ish. And if it's above like 80-20, then people round that to approximately a sure thing. But if you do it in fractions instead, if you talk about the risk of 1 out of 10 versus 1 out of 200, I think that does a better job of getting the point across of exactly what the kind of the magnitudes that we're talking about. So that's the idea that I want everyone to come away with, that it's about risk reduction by approximately 19/20ths, if you want to look at it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I actually saw a tweet from this woman on Twitter who said that she's vaccinated, but she actually managed to test positive. But if you look at the sample size of the amount of users on that website and the fact that, I've basically only seen one person on there, I think that sort of matches that data, because this is the only person I've heard of this,
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have, anecdotal evidence. You're going to have selection bias where people who are vaccinated and get infected are going to be like, careful, I am vaccinated and still got infected. That's why we have to look at the actual clinical trials and the subsequent survey data once the vaccines became widely available and see what the actual rates of infection are. And the data are crystal clear that the vaccines offer extremely strong protection against infection. And I mean, just speaking personally, it's been great being able to get together with friends, family again,
Mm-hmm.
and like acting kind of normally. My wife and I were able to go to the movies the other night for the first time, and we were trying to remember the last movie we went to, and we thought maybe it was the Star Wars. It came out in December before, like maybe that was it. Like we couldn't remember, but we were able to go to the movies because we were vaccinated, and we actually were like, hey, is everyone cool? So everyone sitting around us was vaccinated. It was fine. It was great.
Yeah, that's like I said, walking around the store and seeing people without masks, I don't know, it feels like I've gotten so used to it that it did feel a little bit weird, but hopefully things will sort of get back to the way they were, like almost 2.5 years ago.
Like 2.5. Yeah, it was February of 2020 was when it kind of started, and then it was March of 2020 when things really went haywire. So yeah, it's been March, April, May, June. Yeah, I mean, almost 1.5 years now. So it's, we spent 1.5 years in this one paradigm, and now kind of getting back the other way is going to take some time, and that's okay. And, I still wear my mask when I go to the supermarket. I'm vaccinated, but like, I don't know around me who's vaccinated, right? So you know what? I'm still going to wear my mask, and like, that's fine. Plus I could have an asymptomatic case because I'm vaccinated, and like, I might somehow get infected and never know it. And I wouldn't even think to get a COVID test because like, if I don't have any symptoms, why do I even think of that? Right. So the mask is as much to prevent, if I have an asymptomatic case, to passing it to someone that's unvaccinated, right? The mask is a two-way street. So until the numbers come way, way down and we know we have herd immunity and very low community spread, I'm going to keep wearing a mask when I go to the supermarket just to be safe, just to be a good citizen. But I can also have friends over inside and not worry about it and not be stressed out about it. And so it works both ways.
Yeah, because, if you know that, the people you have over are going to be vaccinated. But I was thinking when I was in the store, I was like, some people could just be, pretending, like, because they're not going to come up to you and say, so maybe, well, I live in Texas, and HEB is managed by people who are conservatives. So it doesn't surprise me that they're kind of the first people to adopt this sort of thing. But so, okay. Well, I think it's time to talk about Kent Hovind.
If we must.
I think we have to. The people in the chat would like to, and I do have some questions about that. So I think a sort of way to transition us into this topic is I'm going to show you a little clip from him that's actually talking about vaccines, and then after that we can sort of talk about your debate with Kent. So I'm gonna. Okay, well, yeah, I forgot about that. But all he was just saying is basically, like, if you think vaccines are safe, why do I have to get one? Like, you can get yours, but I don't need to get one, basically. And I think you talked about that a second ago, but it's like I said, he's forgetting about the people who can't get vaccinated. And actually, what I wanted to say is he has this argument where he says, if a doctor weighs 20 times as much as a baby, then the doctor, to prove to him that vaccines are safe, the doctor should get 20 vaccines. And then if he's okay, then that'll prove to him that it's okay for a baby.
That's not how the immune system works at all. That's not what. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's not that assumes it's a toxin, right? And it's like based on your body weight, and that's not how it works at all. To elicit an immune response, and that's dumb. That doesn't surprise me that like Kent would say something like that. But
yeah, it's ridiculous. First, I don't know why he thinks that a doctor, why he thinks that it's based on your body weight. That's not how vaccines work.
I just was trying to find it. It's in, I just put a video link in the private chat, and it's in there. If it's not the same one, it's a similar one. And he says, if you think they're safe for children, I'll tell you what, I will pay you. I'm not going to do the voice. I'll pay you. I'll pay for you to get the equal number of vaccines pound for pound that they require of babies. Okay, if a 10-pound baby is supposed to get a vaccine and you weigh 170 pounds, you take 17 of the identical shots since you weigh 17 times.
Yeah, that's
not how any of this works. It's not based on your body weight. It's about eliciting an immune response and what dose is required to elicit a response. And baby's immune system, the part of the reason we do some vaccines later in childhood is because an infant's immune system is not going to respond as effectively. So you wait later so their immune system can actually do the response. So it would actually take a larger dose in an infant, for some cases, to elicit a response than it would in, like, say, a 3-year-old, right? Because again, I'm not surprised that Kent knows nothing about this, but it's astonishing to hear him just proudly just be so wrong.
Yeah, it's like, of course, like, not only is he wrong, but it's like the opposite is true. Yeah. So I watched, you showed a replay of your debate about the flood with Kent on your channel, so I enjoyed watching that again. My only wish is that you could have shown that clip of him talking about actually meeting Walt Brown at the airport from the video I made during the debate, because that would have been amazing.
I will say that video, everyone should watch that video of Kent citing Walt Brown over and over again, because Kent pulled from the exact same sources I was referencing, and every time I referenced it, he was like, I don't make those arguments, you're just making up numbers. We don't use those arguments. Like, man, I'm using a young Earth creation source that's explaining how the flood worked, and it's the same source you use. and you really nailed him on that in that video. I don't know how you found all those clips so fast, but it was like there they were. He just constantly using the same source that I used.
Well, yeah, I've seen Kent's back catalog, unfortunately, and so when I was watching that debate, and I was like triggered when I heard him say that he'd never met Walt Brown because I'm thinking I know that's not true, like, and you know this is a problem when you live your whole life on video that's recorded, but you try to lie constantly. It's like the two
You're
things
gonna
don't
get
really
caught.
work together.
You're
Yeah.
gonna get caught. Yeah.
Um, so and also like you were trying to say, well, okay, if if you don't know about this argument from Walt Brown, like I guess that's fair, but are you going to disown what he says, or do you disagree with what he says? And he wouldn't even answer that. He was just insisting that like you've made this up out of whole cloth, and like who's Walt Brown? I don't know who that is. Like
Never met the, I've never met this. Yeah. Yeah, and the kind of follow-on funny parts of that was very early in the debate. He was like, we have to just consider, for people that didn't watch, this was about the arc, and my whole argument was about just like the physics of a wooden boat in a flood and the heat generated by moving that much water around, and how it just none of it would work. And early in the debate, in his opening, he was like, we have to talk about physics, like physics exists. We have to be very systematic about this. Like, okay, great, where does all the heat go? And then he was just like we're just ignoring, the energy generated by such an event. We're just pretending it doesn't exist. We're not going to have to justify that we're pretending it doesn't exist. We're just going to say there's no heat and it's all fine and pretend it's not a problem, even though we started with physics is real. We have to follow how physics works. So again, part of my disappointment there is on me for expecting some semblance of reasonableness out of Kent Hovind, which I think at this point nobody should expect. But I'm still always surprised a little bit, in spite of myself, every time I just see how shameless and blatant it is, right? From Kent and from other young Earth creationists. It's just like, I just want to come out of a conversation one time not disappointed.
yeah. So I was surprised watching that debate, that because I've heard about the heat problem, but it sort of surprised me that Walt Brown actually was the one who put forward the argument that you brought. And was he saying that the heat problem was coming from the the fountains of the deep erupting, or was it also, because I've also heard that generating that much rain would also cause heat? So what can you like explain like why that would cause so much heat?
Yeah, so it's a combination of a bunch of different factors. One, fountains of the deep, right? So you have water that's under the crust, which is to say adjacent to the mantle, which is hot. So you've got hot water, and it essentially erupts outwards, like just geysers covering the whole planet, right? So you've got hot water erupting outwards, very high speeds. So you also have a lot of friction. You've got a ton of water moving, so that's generating a lot of friction. You also have the continents moving at the same time, so you have accelerated plate tectonics. That obviously generates a lot of heat, because if you're moving your continents, I forget the exact math, but instead of like centimeters per year, it's meters per second, I think, is kind of the order of magnitude you're operating in. So that obviously is going to generate a whole lot of friction and heat. The atmosphere is going to, because you have more water vapor in the atmosphere, water vapor is a very efficient greenhouse gas. That traps a whole lot of heat, right? Which also causes problems for the radiates out into space argument, because the water is really good at absorbing heat and space is really bad at absorbing heat, so it doesn't radiate efficiently. It gets trapped in the atmosphere. And then another layer of the heat problem, which is something you've talked about before, is the accelerated nuclear decay from all, you have to explain 4 billion years of radiometric decay, right, in 6,000 years. Well, that generates a lot of heat too. So you've got all these sources generating lots of heat and nowhere for that heat to go. Yeah, so Walt Brown ends up just with the water side of that, with 301 megaton H bombs per meter per day or it's some ridiculous number. It's trillions of it's some like incomprehensibly huge number that it's like it almost doesn't matter how many zeros are on the end of it, because once you get beyond like nine zeros, it doesn't like, okay, add another, it doesn't matter. It's just an obscene amount of heat.
I thought it was only 76 degrees Fahrenheit though. Like
yeah, it only got to maybe 75, whatever he said. Yeah, it was like, well, maybe it got to 74. It's like, all right, Ken, thanks.
Yeah,
That was one of the moments where I was literally speechless in that conversation, because it's just like, here's a person who is making no attempt to engage with what is being said, right?
Yeah.
Just nothing.
That's what I find kind of irritating, because it's like he's always challenging people to debates on his channel. Like that's the one response he has to when he reads comments. Like, but it's like, okay, well, you're in a debate with somebody, but you're not even going to engage with them on the subject matter. You're just going to sort of be dismissive and kind of a jerk. Like, I don't really understand what the point is. Like, it's like, if you don't want to do these debates anymore, like, you don't have to, but it seems like he's trying to save face. Like he wants to look like, I don't know, like a tough guy or something. So he's still challenging people, even though the debates just make him look bad, like every time.
Yeah, I think, I mean, because remember, he's got now a decades-long career doing this, right? With, a brief interregnum in there. And he, for a long time, he's been really successful at it with a very specific debate style that is basically substance-free. But it's the Gish Gallop, it's the BS asymmetry principle, and it's also just be frustrating as heck and make your opponent, like, frustrated, and then they get flustered, and then they get sloppy, and they don't sound as good. And I think what's going on now is he's dealing with a different generation of people. Like he's generating with, I don't know if anyone's seen Guts Gibbon, Erica debate Kent, or Dapper Dino's debate with him on like Are Birds Dinosaurs? And it's a completely different ballgame, because it's very specific, very narrow questions. And the people opposite Kent know exactly what the game is and are playing it better than him, right? And it's so the thing that has worked throughout his career of showing that not only is he right, not only is he a serious person, but he can show that he's right face to face with professionals that say he is wrong. That doesn't work anymore. I don't know if he's genuinely frustrated by it, or if he's just kind of like, kind of turning up the volume on his approach to it. A part of me just suspects it's just all a whole big act, but I don't think it's working. I don't think it's working. I mean, you still get people that are like, yeah, Kent really showed Dapper Dino that birds aren't dinosaurs. Like, no, that's not, like, okay, I don't know what debate you watched, but
yeah, and I think I think one sort of disadvantage that he has, or something that's changed between the early debates, between his hiatus and these newer ones, and
just so everyone's clear, though, the hiatus when he was in federal prison for tax fraud, just so we're all clear. Just that's what we're joking about. Okay, sorry. I just wanted to make sure the audience is all on the same page.
Yeah, just in case you didn't know. On like 54 counts. Is like his debate with I forget the guy's name, but I have a video on my channel of Arizona State University, and Kent, there's a big audience, and like half the audience is Christians, because anytime Kent just says like something about Jesus, they start applauding. And that's that can be tough for the other person when you have, his audience that he can appeal to, but when it's online and he doesn't really have that anymore, I think that sort of takes away from him, because he doesn't have the crowd to appeal to as much. So that's why he carts in all of the people to be in the room with him, so he can make jokes. Yeah.
Get the laugh lines. Yeah. I think the debate. I just Googled Kent Hovind debate Arizona, and it came up. I think it was Michael Shermer was the one there. I don't know if that's the same debate. That looks like that was in
Arkansas State University.
Oh, it was Arkansas. Okay, that's not going to be that one then. But yeah, it's the same thing where you got to have people in the room that can cheer you on. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know if you watch this, but like, I'm a political junkie, especially during election years. So like, I watch all the primary debates on both sides in the lead up to the presidential elections. And the thing that I hate is when they have the audience in with the debate, and a candidate says something and their cheering section just goes nuts, and it's like, shut up. This is not like, you cannot exchange ideas if you're doing it in a stadium full of a crowd cheering as though it is a basketball game. Like,
Hmm.
that doesn't work. And furthermore, it's susceptible to manipulation, right? Because then it's not about who says the right thing, it's about who is loudest. And that frustrates me a lot. But I've learned that facts don't matter over the last 5, 6 years, and that has broken my brain.
Yeah, I know what you mean, because that is definitely something that I think gave a big benefit to Trump during the lead up to, especially like him getting the Republican nomination. Because when you have statements where it's based on not if it's actually true or if be able to be fact checked in the moment, it's just, does it sound good to that crowd?
Does it, right? Does it, just keep hitting that dopamine button, right? And
Yeah.
like, if it does, then everyone cheers, and that's your guy. And that's not a good way to settle scientific debates. That's not a good way to settle public policy. Like, it's a terrible approach to like finding accurate and effective ways of solving problems and generating answers. But it's emotionally a very satisfying way of doing those things, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I will admit that there was, I obviously am not a fan of Trump, but there was one moment during the debates where I was kind of like, I did enjoy it. It was him and Hillary Clinton debating, and I think she said something like, it's a good thing that you're not in charge of like law enforcement, and then he says, because you'd be in jail. And I was like, oh my God, I couldn't help
Right.
but laugh at that one.
It's these kind of zingers that, like, yes, you could see the appeal as a one-liner, but also like the implication of, I'm going to politicize my law enforcement agency. It's like, okay, that's not optimal. That's really
Yeah.
bad. We don't want that.
I'm going to
But
imprison my debate opponent, or
yeah,
like that's not
you
so,
know,
that's something that happens in like Malaysia or like other like third world countries like that have fraud
I mean,
elections. It's not supposed to happen in the United States.
I mean, yeah, I got thoughts about elections in the United States. It's not good.
Well, we could get into that if you want, because I can't even imagine what the next election could be like. Like, um, after the it almost feels like we did have 2 terms of Trump, because it felt like it went on for so long. Because towards the end of the first term, like, I was watching the news a lot, like during the election and after he, um, uh, got inaugurated. But towards the end, I just stopped watching the news because I couldn't. I just didn't. It just put me in a bad mood. So I'm like, I'm just going to ignore this until it's
Yeah,
over, basically, and I'm going
yeah,
to vote.
yeah. I mean, it's a similar problem to what I grapple with the Creation Myths channel and dealing with pseudoscience. It's like, okay, to what degree do I have to take an obviously not just wrong, but unserious, laughably just silly idea? And to what degree do I have to treat it as serious in order to address it? But then in doing so, does that amplify it? Does that elevate it somehow? Right? Like, where's that balance in there? And I used to be um, basically saying, biologists, evolutionary biologists, professionals shouldn't bother with creationism. Just say, you know what, like, this is not a thing that is like relevant to the real world in any significant way. Shouldn't bother with it. Um, I've completely changed my tune on that, because I mean, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this, right?
Hmm.
But the reason is twofold. One is just like with the internet and YouTube and the algorithm, like, this stuff obviously has an audience, and the audience is going to be there whether you are not,
Hmm.
right? I can do my thing or not, but the audience is going to be there. So if I have Kent next to me versus Kent on his own, or next to somebody who is not an expert that can't address his claims,
Right.
then like Kent's word's still getting out there. It's just now there's nothing effectively countering it, right? So it's better to have the accurate information out there. The other thing is that all of this misinformation is connected. And we're seeing that right now with the COVID vaccines and the hoaxes and the conspiracies and the misinformation around those, where like buying into something like creationism or flat Earth or whatever, something that like who cares how old the world is? It doesn't hurt anybody, right? It doesn't like if someone thinks the world's 6,000 years old, like okay, that doesn't like affect anything concretely, but I'm loath to use the phrase because it doesn't work in the actual context, but it's like young earth creationism is a gateway drug for lots of other conspiracy theories, some of which are actually dangerous in the real world, right? So like anti-vax conspiracy theories have actual consequences in the real world. People get sick, people die because fewer people are getting vaccinated than is possible. QAnon is another one that like there's lots of evidence about how people kind of like what the feeder kind of pathways are into buying into the QAnon insanity, and like that's a major source of like right-wing political violence, right? Like that was in an FBI report not that long ago of like this is a thing you need to watch out for. And it's the exercise of convincing your brain that something that is obviously wrong is actually true. Like doing that like weakens your BS detector defenses and makes you more susceptible to being able to believe other things that then could actually have like detrimental effects to society as a whole. And so that's, I think, the more important reason. Like, forget about like who cares what Kent says and whether people listen to him or not. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. But the problem is people being taught to basically shut down their critical thinking faculties has major consequences for like public health and politics and like things that actually matter in the real world. So that's why it's really important to like deal with this stuff.
Yeah, and I've heard a different term if you don't like the gateway drug term when people were talking about the alt-right pipeline, where people would view like some types of content on YouTube, and they get sort of introduced to conservatism, and it sort of ends up with them getting more and more extreme beliefs. And this is something I actually experienced because I'm considering myself more of a leftist now, but I actually was listening to the Ben Shapiro podcast like pretty regularly like a few years ago. And I can see now how the point of, because if you remember when like conservative content was really dominant on YouTube, and now there's a lot more like leftist content creators that have big channels, but it wasn't like that a few years ago. Now I think Steven Crowder has sort of been exposed, but I think the point of this content is to influence how people vote.
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. There's a fantastic podcast. It's a limited series podcast on this exact thing called Rabbit Hole. Strongly recommend everyone listen to this. It's about this exact thing, about kind of the YouTube algorithm and how it guides people towards more extreme. And then actually a few years ago, they tweaked it a little bit so that you didn't get suggested the same thing. Like if you watch one conservative video, you got 10 more suggested. Mm-hmm. They tweaked it a little bit to make the suggestions more viewpoint diverse. Which leads to really funny things like me getting suggested really like bat poop conservative things occasionally, which is really funny. It's like YouTube, come on, I'm not going to watch that. But they were able to kind of like arrest that kind of accelerating spiral of extreme content by just tweaking their algorithm just a little bit. But check out this podcast, Rabbit Hole. It's about that exact thing, and it was fascinating to listen to it. And the thing that I really find really, really interesting about this whole thing, because I think I'm a little bit older than you. I was in college in the aughts. And so like, I remember reading like all the new atheist stuff when those books came out, like Dawkins and Hitchens and all that stuff, like when they were out. Mm-hmm. And there's like a really, really weird correlation that I don't understand, and I would love to understand it. That is, between this correlation between kind of the new atheist movement and then modern like right-wing online politics. And I cannot wrap my brain around how that happened. but I would 100% read a book on it. Like I don't understand how that pipeline worked, because there's an alternate history where it went the other way and the new atheists became like the online leftists. But I don't understand how all these different factors came together all at once. It was, you got the new atheists, and then like I think Gamergate actually played a surprisingly large role in it, for such like a weird niche kind of thing that happened for a few years. And it's such a weird thing, and I can't put my finger on it how that happened, but it did.
Well, I think one thing might have been, if you have a group of people who read this sort of same material, and they were into an atheist and skeptic movement, and you had sort of a reaction around 2010 and on of online censorship, and the sort of like SJW videos that came on YouTube. And I think some people were accepting of these type of leftists and kids on college campuses that might have different type of gender identities. And then you had another type, and it's the same group of skeptics who went in the opposite direction and reacted sort of like badly to these type of people, and wanted to, instead of being accepting towards these types, they became transphobic, or they wanted to mock these type of people. And that sort of bigotry, definitely the conservative YouTubers fed on that a lot. So I think that could have been part of it. And I think also like there's a sexism aspect of it too, because that was a big problem with Gamergate. I think the original message of Gamergate was something that I could agree with, but I felt like the sort of on paper message of what it was supposed to be was not what was actually happening, and it really got out of control.
Remember the on paper purpose of Gamergate was a retconned PR campaign, right? It was never about ethics and gaming journalism. It was about harassing women that were making games that weren't representative of like the dude bros that wanted their like game, right? It was it's the same kind of thing with like intelligent design, right? Like, no, this was never about science. This was always about a PR campaign to get around a Supreme Court decision. And like Michael B, he can say whatever he wants, but like this was always PR first and science second. Same thing with Gamergate. It was essentially it was a harassment campaign first, and then it was a PR campaign about ethics second. But like, like I said, I would read a book about the history of that era and those politics, because I just like, and I know people from college who I was friends with, who like we were friends and very politically on this, like it like very the same politically in college, and then like here I am over here, like I'm a leftist. Like I think that comes across to pretty much anybody who knows me. Like, yep, that's just how it is. Card carrying SJW, that's me. And but then this guy I was friends with in college, it's like, how did you become like alt-right? How did that happen? Because we started at the same place, 2008, 2009, we were the same. And then like, I don't know. I don't understand.
Yeah, I had the same experience. Like I was friends with somebody, and then they started watching Tim Pool, and then the next thing I know, they're posting Facebook updates defending the Proud Boys, and I'm like,
oh no, yeah,
like,
and to bring this back, I think it has to do with this susceptibility to I don't even know if misinformation is the right word, but the ability to kind of drop the barriers to critical thinking. And for some reason, the new atheist movement turned out to be, as much as the stories, people that bought into that like to tell themselves about being, skeptics and critical thinkers and just the facts, right? It turned out that members of that movement were just as susceptible to it as, creationists or anti-vaxxers or whatever, right? We have to constantly be keeping the critical thinking muscle strong, right? It's a muscle you have to work out, because it atrophies if you don't use it, and it atrophies generally if you don't use it for a specific thing, right? So that's the worry, right? You can put your guard down for Richard Dawkins or for Kent Hovind, but the problem is that makes you susceptible to other stuff, and And here we are. Trump was president for 4 years, and now here I am on YouTube fighting with creationists.
Yeah. So you made some videos about like Michael Behe and irreducible complexity, and then so he's actually been on your channel. Did he contact you, or how did that collab come about?
Yeah, I reached out to him. I just sent out a bunch of messages to a bunch of people earlier this year, kind of January, February, March, and just seeing if anybody wanted to come on. And people on both sides. So I last winter at some point, I think it was, I talked to Ken Miller, who's a prominent biologist. He's at Brown University, testified at the Dover trial.
Is he a Catholic also?
So Ken Miller's very famously, he's Catholic. He's written extensively about evolutionary biology and his faith. He has a book called Finding Darwin's God that I recommend to everybody. It's a really great read. So I had him on. We had a really interesting conversation. I had Dr. Behe on twice now. We talked about irreducible complexity in his first book back in March. And then just yesterday, we talked about his second book, and which is called The Edge of Evolution. And it's about kind of the rate at which evolutionary change can occur. And he hypothesizes essentially a speed limit for evolutionary change, and relies on some very shoddy evolutionary biology to do so. So, but I reached out to him. He agreed to come on. And after the first one, we were chatting just, off air afterwards. He's like, yeah, if you ever want to do it again, let me know. And I said, awesome, let's do it again. So a few months later, here we are. And I'm hoping I can get him on one more time. And we'll talk about his third book, which is called Darwin Devolves, and is, I think, equally wrong as the other two. And so we'll have another conversation about that. And I do have some feelers out to other people. Couple people have just straight up said no. Nathaniel Jeanson just never got back to me. The whole CMI crew, Paul Price, Rob Carter, John Sanford, I just collectively got a nope from them. But I got a couple other people that in the works, and a couple people that I've had on before that are going to come back on at some point, and it's just getting schedules figured out. So I'll keep doing more stuff like that. I think as much as it's kind of a longer format, but I think it's productive for people to have that conversation in a non-debate setting and just like just a back and forth. Yeah, that's how that goes. It's just me just sending emails to a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, I agree, and I've had sort of the same experience. But I will say about Michael Behe, like his books may be wrong, but they've got great titles.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I said, PR, right? He's written 3 books on intelligent design, and they have broadly similar arguments. The specific thrust of each one is different, but they overlap considerably. Published not one paper on any of this stuff, right? In the time of writing all these books, which first one was 1996, then 2007, and I don't know when the third one was, sometime in the teens. And any peer-reviewed literature on any of this? No. It's just books for popular level non-scientific audience. PR campaign, salesmanship, like, yeah. And you've seen him on, he's happy to talk, he's genial, he's friendly, it's a good conversation, and he's persuasive. But it's not, the underlying science is not good.
Well, that's an interesting way that I think creationists have gotten around the sort of argument of like, oh, well, you guys don't publish in peer review literature. It's like, well, they just write a book, because the general population isn't really going out of their way to read scientific papers, and a lot of them have jargon that's hard to understand if you're not familiar with the subject matter anyway.
100%.
But if you have a book that's you can get at Barnes and Noble, that's a lot easier for a general audience to read. So it's like you said, the tactics they have are pretty good. Sometimes it's easy to see why they've been sort of effective. But I agree with what you said about it's surprising if you just sort of ask people if they'd be interested in talking, the responses you get. Because I don't know if you've seen, but I actually did an interview with Kent Hovind's ex-wife on my channel recently, and I've been doing videos about that.
Recommend that to everybody. If people haven't watched that, strongly recommend that, because I think that's the only interview with her anywhere. I haven't seen anything in any other media. So I mean, good on you for landing that. That's like, that's like legit news. That's that is legitimate news that I don't think anybody, like news outlet, online, like nobody has done anything like that. So you deserve a lot of credit for that one. That was really good.
Yeah, well, I've been in contact with her, and I feel like I knew that Kent Hovind was kind of a scoundrel, but it's so much worse than I even thought it was. Like, and I'm working on another video um, about just this whole topic, and it's kind of a mess, honestly. Like, I feel bad for Miss Cindy, but she's a sweet person, so I'm glad that I've been able to help her out in any way that I can. So yeah, I definitely recommend watching that video if you guys haven't seen it already.
Second that, yeah. It does open up a challenging ethical question for, like, I want to talk to, when it comes to creationism, I want to have people on, I want to talk to them, I want to show through just like conversation that their ideas just can't stand up to scrutiny. The problem is when the people that are promoting those ideas are just genuinely vile people. So like Kent is a good example of this. If the timing had been the other way, so my recent debate with him was I think like the week before you did that interview, and then like if the timing had been reversed, like, man, like I don't know, because he shouldn't have a platform. Nobody should be inviting him on. He's obviously just awful, right? But at the same time, he's gonna have a platform. People are going to invite him on. Although I was happy to see that people on MDD for that last debate were like, why are you still having him on? This is pointless, which was nice to see. But like, to the extent that people are going to give him a platform to do his thing and put people up against him, I would like to be the person that's up against him, because I know that I can correct the misinformation that he puts out there. To what extent do am I then implicated in the other stuff, right? By not calling him on it, or by appearing with him, am I then kind of, I don't know. It's a challenging question, and extends to other people too. There's a lot of young Earth creationists that have really like despicable views on things like rights for trans people, right? Or in a what year is it moment, rights for more broadly the LGBT community, right? And like, it's 2021. We settled that already. Come on. But like, you get YouTube creationists that like in their private streams, if you watch the private streams with some of these people, talking about, like, I don't know if people know who this guy Praise or Smokey Saint, like they'll throw ideas out there that are just like, yes, it's, I don't want to like say a specific thing because, I don't want to mischaracterize their views, but like basically paraphrasing seems to imply that like, it's okay, like being gay is a capital offense is the implication. And it's like, no, it's 2021. And if you're comfortable expressing that idea in public, you don't get a platform. You don't get to go on and like just pretend we're just having a science conversation. Like, no, that's awful. And you get marginalized, right? That's not cancel culture. That's everyone telling you you're a jerk, right? That's what that is. That's called consequences for the speech you are making on a public platform. And I wrestle with, like, to what extent do I engage versus marginalize when it's engaging with people that have really terrible views unrelated to the science that we would be talking about. And I don't know what the answer is there. If anyone has a good answer for that, I'm all ears, because I don't have a good answer.
Yeah. I know that because I watched a stream with Smokey Saint, and he was actually talking to Will Kincaid's wife, who I will say, obviously Will Kincaid has some pretty messed up views, but I was surprised at some of the stuff his wife was saying, because I was mostly agreeing with it, because it was a stream during Pride Month, and she actually gave a pretty good history of how Pride Month started and all of that, with the Stonewall riots and all that stuff, and how the people who started it were but some of the stuff Smokey Saint was saying was basically saying that employers should be able to discriminate against trans people, and that trans people should live like together in their own apartment building instead of in the general public because they would get along with each other. I don't know. It was stupid. It was like talking about segregation. It was just some really stupid like opinions from him, but I wouldn't expect anything else.
Yeah, and then, you know, and to what extent do you have to like consider that stuff in terms of having a conversation with people? And I don't know the answer because I want to be able to engage with the bad science and the you know, want to be able to have the conversation and show why the bad science is bad, right? I can't do that if there's nobody to have that conversation with, because I can just say it on my channel, but it's more effective doing it face to face. But then that opens up the can of worms of the people that you are having that conversation with, and I don't know where that lands.
Yeah, you know, that's pretty tricky, but I think it's something where, you know, these are sort of new questions that are being sort of discussed, and I think we'll have to sort of learn as we go along because although I see on Modern Day Debate, they are having more debates about sort of ethical issues of like trans rights, and Vosh is doing debates on there. Like I saw his debate with T-Jump on the like super straight thing that was just ridiculous. And I thought I have my opinions about T-Jump because I was a big fan of him, but I've said before that I think when he's debating in favor of science or, you know, like against creationists, like I think he's done a really good job. But then I think he's a really perfect example of somebody who's an atheist and somebody who seems to be pretty well versed and educated in science, and he's a great debater. But then when you get over to the political side, I just don't seem to agree with any of his opinions. Like he's, you know, argued in favor of all lives matter too, and just I don't know. I don't really understand that. So it's like I think he's a good example of what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I part of that is on the platforms. I think like I don't think MDD, you know, Modern Day Debate should be, or any of the other debate platforms should be hosting debates that essentially boil down to should trans people have rights? Like that's not debatable. That's just we're not going to entertain that question. Like that's why are we doing this? And or more broadly, you know, do trans people exist? Like you know, why we're not going to entertain that question. And there needs to be a line somewhere where we're not going to entertain these questions that are the answers are obvious and people may disagree with those obvious answers, but like we as a society, we have moved on past that question and that's the end. And it seems like, you know, it's the quintessential problem of the internet that anybody can say anything, and that seems to give people license to like, oh, I can say anything. Okay, I'm literally going to say anything now. And that seems to be anybody can say anything, and then people take that as therefore it's a good idea. And no, it's not. Don't say like some of these debates are not worth having. In fact, they're actively harmful to have the debate. Just don't do it. But here we are because the internet and facts don't matter.
Yeah, you know, I've heard the argument before about creationism debates, although I don't really agree with it. But I think when it comes to, like you said, topics where we should platform the question, where even having the debate lets people who might not know better see it and think, oh, well, this issue is still being debated. Like maybe we haven't decided this yet. So that can be, you know, one issue where I think having the debate is harmful. Because I had somebody ask me, you know, if I would, because I'm pro-choice, and I had them ask me if I would debate on the topic, and I said, well, I don't really want to debate the question of whether or not people who want to get abortions deserve to have them or not. You know, I think that should be a given.
Right. But it's not. It just. Yeah, I see in the chat here from our friend Monkey for Banana that James has said before that a platform anyone won't get his channel taken down. That standard is ridiculous. That's an absurd standard. Like there needs to be a higher standard of literally won't get your channel taken down as the line, right? That's that's not where the standard for what is like acceptable questions to debate should be, right? That's not where that is.
Yeah, and that should be a given. That shouldn't be something that you have to say. Like, uh, well, so I think we sort of reached the hour mark, which is when I usually call it on my interview videos. But thanks for coming on the channel, Dr. Dan. And I'll have your channel linked in the description, and some of the videos that we talked about, I'll put the links to. But is there anything you want to say before we sort of sign off?
Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure to chat. Thank you everybody for watching. I don't think I have anything specific coming up. I'll my schedule is sporadic and unpredictable in terms of YouTube stuff. So I'll have stuff at some point. I just don't know what or when right now. So last thing I'll say is everyone, please get vaccinated. Please get vaccinated. Because it's really important, and we're doing really well, and we're this close to beating this thing, even with the new variants that are floating around. Vaccines are still effective. They're still working. It's great. So get vaccinated, and things will be all the way normal soon if everyone does.
Hopefully. All right. Well, yeah, and I'm working on a new video in my sort of saga of the Kent Hovind and Cindy Lincoln drama. So that's going to be coming out soon. I'm collaborating with her on stuff that's going to be in the video. So I think the next one's going to be a doozy. So look out for that. And both of us are on Twitter. So I'll put those links in the chat as well. And yeah, thank you guys in the chat for watching. And I'll see you guys for our next video. Thanks.